The least visited states in the U.S. Well, geographically speaking, I have to think it's got to be Hawaii and Alaska. But as for the other three, I have no idea.
And what comes at number 1 will totally shock you.
Interesting. So if number 1 is going to shock me, then it can't be a part of the lower 48 contiguous states. Or maybe it's Maine. This is interesting that we even have this data.
Totally shock you. At number 5,
gotta be
Nebraska.
Okay, that's already going against the way I was kind of thinking. Because Nebraska's like centrally kind of located, I figured people would just like drive through it. That counts, right?
People don't want to stop here, even though this state has big cities and beautiful spots, but it's still just a flyover state. Only 19% of the population...
Okay, so now I'm starting to rethink, it's got to be neighboring states, right? It's got to be like South Dakota, North Dakota, maybe Kansas. I mean, they do call this region of the U.S. flyover state.
Only
states.
19% of the population made the trip to Nebraska. At number 4,
19%.
we have Idaho.
19% have made the trip to Nebraska? So we're saying out of all Americans, 19% of Americans have been in Nebraska. That seems way too high. There's no way. There's no way.
Full of amazing mountains and parks.
Idaho.
With famous
I've got an
like
uncle
Montana
that lives in
and
Idaho.
Wyoming, it gets left behind. Just 19% of people visited Idaho as well.
It's actually a lot of Californians that are moving to Idaho. 19%. So again, that still seems high. Number 3
is Montana.
Okay, so maybe it's not gonna. Well, now that I think about it, a lot of people do visit Hawaii at least once in their life. Or is this data just talking about in the last year? Yeah, this is looking like it's just gonna be the whole flyover region. Montana's so beautiful though.
But the east is super empty.
There's been so many great videos like TikToks, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels showing the beauty of Montana. There are a lot of people wanting to travel here, hike here. Just the landscapes are incredible. Maybe Wyoming then? I still think the Dakotas. There's still 2 more. 19%.
At number 2, it's North Dakota. It's a long way from big cities, and there
so I figured North Dakota might be number 1. It's got to be Alaska number 1, right? Maybe I'm wrong. People do cruises to Alaska. I mean, everyone talks about, you know, going to Alaska, how beautiful it is. Kind of hard to miss it on a map too. It's like up there. It's the largest state.
Hotspots. Coming in at the 15%. Finally, the state at number 1 is so wild, you'd think people would be lining up to visit here. But
Alaska.
Not so much. Only 13% of people visited this state, even though it's one of the most unique places in the U.S. It's Alaska.
Yeah, it's just hard to get there. I've wanted to go to Alaska. I've had the idea of just taking a flight up there, see what all the hype's about. Actually, they don't have any hype. Sorry, but there's hype, just people don't go through with it. More popular states like Montana and Wyoming proceeds to rank Montana as less visited. Idaho as the 4th least visited due to famous neighbors like Montana and Wyoming goes on to instantly rank Montana as the 3rd least visited. To be fair, it was 5, 4, and 3. They all had the same like 19%. But yeah, that line probably wasn't great. A pretty basic but very big contributing factor on why this is it's just kind of hard to get to a lot of these places. As you can see, the vast majority of Americans live nowhere near these least visited states, and that's especially the case for Alaska. So you gotta fly in, and it's just like, I actually lived in Alaska for 3 years, and I think the only reason why people don't want to come is because people overestimate the winter. I have seen it get absolutely beautiful in the summer in Alaska. Bro, you'd think that Oklahoma would be up there. Literally no one comes here. Well, they border the 2nd biggest state in terms of population, Texas. That's definitely a factor. Number 1 may shock you. Ranks the most remote place in the U.S. as number 1. Classic YouTube Shorts. Very nice, Glor. The most underrated state of America. Well, is it going to be Maine? I wouldn't have expected that one.
The U.S. state that shares a border with just one other state. It's also the most peaceful state.
Really? It only shares a border with one other U.S. state. I guess I could have put 2 and 2 together. Because even a place like Florida, a peninsula, still borders 2 different states. And obviously, if you're a landlocked state, you probably border a whole lot of other states.
State in the United States.
It's the most peaceful.
You see, Maine shares its longest border with Canada and is surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean to the southeast. The only U.S. state.
They also have great like crabs and seafood up there. That's always what I've heard. I've never been there before though.
Borders is New Hampshire. In fact, for many people living here, Canada is actually closer than any other U.S. state. Maine is 90%
Yeah, that makes sense.
forest.
Oh, I've never even thought about like actual population density of Maine. Now, maybe for many people in Maine, they're closer to the Canadian border than New Hampshire, but still the vast majority of their population is along the coast. I don't think I've ever started a video where it's just Maine propaganda. I'm not complaining. It's interesting. I'll say that.
Any other U.S. state.
Well,
Maine
yes.
is 90% forest. Home
90%
to Acadia
forest?
National Park, and the easternmost point of the U.S. is in Lubec, Maine. That means you'll see the sunrise here before anyone else in the country.
Yes, and surprisingly, even this point, if you compare it to like South America, isn't actually all that east. If you followed a straight line down, you'd actually only be in the middle of Venezuela. Not sure why I'm bringing this up, but just the easternmost point in the U.S. isn't that east, funny enough. On a worldwide scale, basically.
That means you'll see the sunrise here before anyone else in the country.
I guess.
It's also the coldest.
Well, yes, obviously you'd see the sunrise, but there's lots of other places where you could see the sunrise way before this part in Maine.
Biggest state in New England. Produces 99% of America's wild blueberries.
Oh, really?
of its lobster and
lobster.
yeah, the first naval battle of the American Revolution happened right here.
Not surprising because obviously it was close to Canada, and Canada was a British territory, so a lot of fighting would happen there. Technically, Alaska is the most eastern state, which is such a funny geography fact that is true because it does have these islands over here that barely stretch over. This is when the new day begins. These islands actually get extremely close to Russia. Maine is low-key a very cool state. Arcadia is stunning. Again, I mentioned the seafood. That's what I keep hearing about. Maine is also the closest state to Africa. Thanks, Factoria. Why is Canada's capital so close to the US? Well, because anything more north than that is just going to be frozen. But also because Canada has to have a pretty good relationship with the US.
So close
I mean,
to the USA.
there's a whole lot
Canada's
of
capital is just about
there's a whole lot of discussion about that right now. This is an interesting topic to cover just because of the whole 51st state talk with Trump. Maybe putting their capital so close to the US might actually backfire in terms of an invasion possibility.
Away from the US
Only 100 kilometers. And also, most of Canadian population only lives 100 kilometers from the US border. That's probably part of the reason too.
Land. Why is it not located anywhere at the center of the country?
Okay, well, these are ridiculous spots. If you know anything about Canada, this would not work. One reason why many countries choose a certain city to be their capital is purely because of administrative purposes. Sometimes it's better to be located more centrally located to the rest of your population, even if the city is not the most famous city of the country. But there's also plenty of other reasons as well, to be honest.
Why is it not located anywhere at the center
But this
of the
is
country?
purely like,
And why
yeah,
do they
you want your capital city to be like -3 degrees on average every single day of the year? I don't think that seems like a good idea.
even choose Ottawa at all? During the War of 1812, Canada...
Okay, I was gonna make that point too. I mean, a lot of it has to do with history. A lot of it, to be honest. Like a lot of it, I mean.
was then controlled by the British, was at war with the USA, with Canadian forces even capturing Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
and
burning
setting
down
the
the
White
capital.
House on fire. Given the history
Or
between the two nations,
at least
it
setting
seems
the White House
logical
on fire.
that Canada might have chosen a location farther from its neighbor for safety. But they didn't. Even with growing cities and developments, they choose to keep the capital near the border. So why
I feel like the answer they're going to give, there's going to be one answer, but to properly answer this question, there's actually several. There's lots of answers why it's Ottawa.
is that? There are two reasons for this.
Oh, okay,
and
well, he's
the
gonna give us
second one
two.
is the most important. The first reason is that the northern part of the country is mostly empty and hard to live in.
Yes.
So big cities
Okay,
and
we talked about
industries
that.
are near the southern
It's like
border.
32
But
people
more
that live up here.
importantly, the second reason is Quebec, which was once a French colony. So it has tried to be independent a few times. So Canada keeping their capital to Ottawa helps keep Quebec stable.
That actually wasn't an answer that I expected. But now in retrospect, okay, I get it. But there's more. It was also picked because of the rivers which pass through it, making shipping cargo much easier. The actual reason is that Canada was much smaller in 1867. Yeah, you have to think about like Canada's growth and the US. We both expanded very similarly from the east to the west. Canadian here, the further north, the worse the cold is. Kind of hard to do anything when it's -4 degrees Celsius, which is also -4 degrees Fahrenheit. Kingston was the original capital. During the war, they moved it to Ottawa because the rivers creates a choke point, makes naval attacks impossible. Helps keep Quebec stable. That was the best one I've ever heard. First of all, most cities are located near a convenient water source, and then number 2, transportation. Yeah, that's St. Lawrence River. Very, very important, giving you access out through this mouth and to the rest of the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, shipping, like someone else said. Again, another one by Glore. Top 5 safest and most dangerous states. Well, we know Maine's up there. Probably Minnesota. I'm talking about safest. In terms of danger, ooh. I'm always so surprised when you look at like most dangerous cities in the world. You know, it's like cities in Mexico, cities in Brazil, and then like a lot of US areas. Actually, as an American, that doesn't surprise me as much, but it does surprise other people around the world, Europeans. I would definitely be very, very careful in certain parts of the US. Vermont.
And you can also
because people forget maybe.
calm down if you live in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Safest
The
state.
New Jersey's the 3rd safest. Okay, Maine is on this one apparently.
Maine, which comes second, but the safest of them all.
The safest. Oh, it's okay. Never mind.
New Hampshire.
All New England. Wow. Boston probably is a little bit too big for Massachusetts to be in the top 5.
On the other hand,
I mean, the
should
bigger,
watch out
you know, when you have more population, you're gonna have obviously more crime.
if you live in the 5th most
Unless
dangerous
this is
state, South Carolina.
South Carolina,
or
Arkansas,
which comes
Louisiana. My birth state of Alabama, like I mentioned, probably.
in 4th place. But you better start
Maybe
thinking
not,
about
actually.
moving away if you live in Louisiana. Alaska.
Oh,
or
Alaska.
The most dangerous state in all of the USA, which is New Mexico.
Ooh, number 1, New Mexico. I knew, yeah, Albuquerque's got, it all depends on how you define this though. There's so many different ways you can rank, like, you know, least safe, dangerous. Like, is petty crime included included. New Mexico can thank Breaking Bad for its reputation of, oh, bro has never been to Jersey. Ain't no way New Jersey is safer than Vermont. That's what I was saying. I'm just imagining all of the two people living in Alaska robbing each other. No, the internet was like collectively realizing what was actually going on in Alaska like not that long ago on Twitter and TikTok. It's a lot more crazy up there than you'd expect. Maybe that's part of the reason why no one's visiting it. I like how the safest states are together and next to Canada. Thanks for the info, Globadick David. The most hated states in the US. Okay, so California, Texas, Florida, places with big population. It's easy to find people from like the bigger places annoying. Definitely California's got to win this.
The most liked state in the US
I put $100 on it.
Here are the top
The most
5.
liked state is Minnesota. I mean, I guess this place can't really do much to offend people. It's kind of a pretty inoffensive place.
But here are the top 5 most hated states. What comes
Texas
at
is
number
2.
1 will seriously make you worry.
It make you worry. Oh, number 5 is California?
5. It's California.
Wow, that's incredible. Would have easily thought my state would be number 1, especially just seeing all the internet comments.
It's one of the most hated states. 6% of Californians say it's the worst state, and many are leaving.
6% of Californians say it's the worst state. That's not good. I thought it'd be higher. Dang, would I say California is the worst state? I probably wouldn't, even though I do really enjoy bashing on it, obviously. I'd probably have to say the worst state has got to be my birth state. It's definitely got to be up there, right? It's got to be in the top 3 as worst state. Is that how this...
Number 4, it's West Virginia.
Oh, West Virginia. I just feel bad about this. Why would West Virginia be the most hated state? So is this data being driven by like polling Americans saying what is the worst state? I don't think people have a negative, well, I don't know. I was going to say I don't think people have a negative connotation of West Virginia.
0.76% of its residents have already moved to other states. At number 3, we got New York. The high cost of living
yeah,
here.
New York makes a lot of sense. But again, yeah, if we're polling Americans by just saying what is the worst state, it doesn't mean that Americans hate these states. They're just, I don't know. I mean, look at New York. I'm sure people like New York. It's just really expensive.
Has made it one of the most
I remember this is like the
states.
first time I ever bought a like a $10 coffee in Manhattan, and now like this was like several years ago. Now like a lot of coffees can be $10 around me. That was unheard of back in the day. Actually, to be fair, I still don't really know that many $10 coffees, but prices, because it's been going up, are getting closer and closer to that. I can't imagine what that place is at now.
Say it's
probably
the worst place to live.
$13
At number
coffee.
2,
12%. Okay, so they're only asking Americans what's the worst place to live. So there will be states like maybe Mississippi, maybe Alabama.
it's New Jersey.
Oh.
It's crowded, stressful.
That's literally just everyone in New York voting for New Jersey, I think.
And 10% of its residents even call it the worst state. Finally,
10%.
at number 1, a massive 25% of its people
Number 1, 25 say this is the worst state. I actually don't even know. Could it be Alaska again?
say it's the worst, with so many leaving. And the state that tops this list is Illinois.
Ooh, Illinois. I would have never expected that. Dang, I'm trying to visit Chicago for the first time this year. Illinois is a lot bigger than just their main city, Chicago. New Jersey is only bad near the city. Otherwise, it's quiet and chill. As a Minnesotan, this makes me happy. Only problems with Illinois are higher tax rates and Chicago. Oh, so that is the reason you don't like Illinois. Why is West Virginia on this list? The residents are leaving because the coal industry's dead. I live in Illinois. It's honestly really chill. You can say that again. It is definitely very chill up here. I think that's actually part of the problem. Hi, person from Illinois. Currently, I'm coping with -20 to -30 degree wind chills. Ah, that is the joke, I think. I live in California and have never met anyone that doesn't like it here. Thanks, Glor60. The U.S. has a lot more than just the 50 states. There's a lot of hidden American islands.
50 states.
Puerto Rico
When we
is one.
talk
That's
about
probably the
the
most
United
famous
States,
easily.
people
But there's Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm trying to remember some of the others. That's sad.
think of the
that I can't.
landmass of the continental United
Yes.
States. Some remember Alaska. Even fewer think of Hawaii.
And
But
then,
what about these other lands?
And then we got Puerto Rico. Oh yeah, the Marshall Islands.
The U.S. consists not only of 50 states, but also includes 16 territories under its
16
jurisdiction, 2
territories.
of which are still under dispute. 11 of these territories have no...
There's Guam, Northern Mariana Islands. Oh, that's right. American Samoa, Wake Island, Jarvis Island, Kingsman Reef,
Permanent
Midway. I mean,
population.
whenever
They are
I'm studying
mostly-
like the Pacific Theater in World War II, that's when I'm remembered, reminded of all the U.S. states.
small islands and reefs. But the remaining 5, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, are quite populated, with around
Yes.
4 million people living there.
Wow, that's crazy.
Interestingly enough, not
So these people can vote in the presidential, election, but it's just contributing to the popular vote. Obviously, these places don't have any electoral college votes, and that's kind of controversial because that means they don't really make an impact on, what president we elect.
all of them are U.S. citizens.
Unless some of them are still like registered to live in, a certain state. If one like technically lives in California, but they are currently living in Guam or something.
Million people living
4
there.
million people.
Interestingly enough, not all of them are U.S. citizens.
Yes.
Residents of American Samoa have the status of U.S. nationals. They do not have the right to vote and must go through a naturalization
Some of them still can, though, from what I was reading about, but not all of them, yeah.
process to gain citizenship. All of these island territories were obtained by the U.S. at different times and in different ways. Some were purchased, some were obtained through treaties, and some were annexed.
Pretty much the classic way. Yes, the good old taxation without representation. You would think we wouldn't be doing this anymore since that's why our country exists. Annex is the polite way of saying taken by force. Well, yes, and the hundreds of military bases we have in other countries. I mean that is a point. We're specifically talking about our overseas islands and stuff. Yes, all of those 5 territories have 4 million people, but 3.2 million of those are Puerto Ricans alone. Yeah, that is crazy. 3.2 million, that's more than a lot of U.S. states in general, more than Wyoming, more than Montana. If Puerto Rico was a state, it would rank as the 33rd biggest. So there's a lot of people that live on that island. Meanwhile, all the other U.S. territories come in at 53, 54, 55, 56. While we're having this conversation, I feel like more and more nowadays. And I think a lot of it has to do with the geography community. More and more people are being interested. I think a lot of Americans like 10, 20, 30 years ago kind of forgot that Puerto Rico existed. Some think of Alaska, even fewer think of Hawaii. Yeah, I would have reversed that. I think more people think of Hawaii than they do Alaska. Meanwhile, Wyoming has about 600,000 people and has 2 senators representing them in Congress. Make it make sense. Cool video, Geo Globe Tales. And a big old thanks to my patrons. I stole Drew Durnil's Robux and won't return them until he plays Cartwright into Drew Durnil. Alexander the Argentinian Grandpa. I'm back, boys. aPhatNarwhal. Connor I will literally revive DOOCHBAGGINS. Fredrik doesn't realize Imperial Japan flag is the same as modern Japan flag. NordTyrol. Tambre, the Mexican 760. And ZaneyBoi.